Thank you, Maureen. Well, good morning. This is going to be really fast, folks. With a lot of information coming your way. I'm going to really skinny it down. I was in this room yesterday with a number of you. Good to see some familiar faces from yesterday. There were about 25 that came for the docent training, and we spent 3 hours together. So I'm going to take 3 hours of content and boil it down into about 35 minutes for you. So strap in. We're going to move quickly. The good news is that even after I leave, this beautiful volume of the St. John's Bible will be with you for a year. So this is just a little bit an amuse-bouche, if you will. So I am Brad Neary, as Maureen stated. I am the director of the St. John's Bible Heritage Program. As you can see from the number after my name, I'm a proud alumnus of St. John's. It's a very special place to me. Graduated in 1981. St. John's University is in Collegeville, Minnesota. Anybody been to Collegeville, Minnesota? Okay, we've got a few. That's terrific. Yes, Eric's been there. Contact information there. Although I do my work out of Seattle, Washington. It's a long story. Don't have time to get into it, but that's where I do my work. I can probably do this work anywhere that has a decent airport and a strong Wi-Fi connection. But Seattle is the place where I'm located these days. I'm a proud Episcopalian. Grew up a Roman Catholic for the first 40 years of my life. The last 26 years have been as a member of the Anglican Communion with all of you. A very active member of my church in the Madrona neighborhood of Seattle, Epiphany Parish.
Who's your rector?
Doit Kahn, the Reverend Doit Kahn.
Yes, there you go.
Is this your son is a friend of Doit, is that correct?
He's a very close friend and a son of one of the other physicians at Mayo Clinic.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. I know Doit Jr. and Sr. very well. They're very, very dear friends of mine. So nice to see you. I don't know. I'll have to ask him about that. I think an English name, actually. I'm also a member of a very small team of people who help share the heritage vision of the St. John's Bible around the world. Our executive director and our program coordinator, both of whom are located in Minneapolis, or actually at St. John's in Collegeville. Give you a sense of St. John's really, really quickly. I want to take just 2 or 3 minutes to kind of set the standard or kind of set a foundation for you around this place and the people who gave birth to the idea and commissioned this special Bible. St. John's University on 3,000 acres of woods and lakes in central Minnesota. Lovely, lovely place. Incredibly special to me. So special that I'm going to spend eternity there in lot D19. Yeah. Purchased, ready to go. I go visit it sometimes. I lay down on it sometimes. It's all good. Yeah, but a lovely spot. So people have asked me in the past, is there really, it sounds like kind of like you made it up, Collegeville, Minnesota? And I said, there really is a Collegeville, Minnesota. And I'm going to tell you where it is, but before I tell you where Collegeville is, I'm going to show you where Minnesota is. Okay, we're going to start with that. And I know you know because you're really close by, but I do this for the people on the West Coast and the East Coast that only fly over Minnesota. So that's for their purposes. But a little closer view of that, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, about where the Red Star and Collegeville is about where the Blue Star is, about a 95-mile trip up 94 to that spot, about 750 miles from where we're standing today. So the St. John's monks, the group of Catholic Benedictine monks that reside at St. John's University, got their start in Metten, Germany, at Metten Abbey. A group of them moved from Germany over to Latrobe, Pennsylvania, established St. Vincent's. And then a group of those monks were sent to the wilds of Minnesota, even before Minnesota was a state, in the 1850s, and established St. John's University on the Mississippi River, close to where St. Cloud, Minnesota is located now. And then they got wind of this beautiful parcel of land that I showed you a few slides ago, and they said, we're moving camp. And so they picked up and they moved to the beautiful spot that I showed you and established St. John's University on that beautiful Lake Sagatagan. I want to give you a sense of the architecture because these people have always been pioneers, and that's part of the story, the pioneer story of why they stepped into the St. John's Bible. So this is the architecture that they built in the 1850s. This is the main quadrangle. It's where they worshiped, it's where they slept, it's where they studied, it's where they ate. And then they began to outgrow this campus, and they needed more architecture, they needed more buildings, and rather than just patty cake more of the red bricks together and build more of these buildings, they went with a Bauhaus architect, Marcel Breuer, who brought this kind of architecture to our campus. Wildly different, pioneering spirit. This is the 1950s, 1960s, folks, so this was a real leap, cutting edge, maybe even bleeding edge architecture. So we moved into that. just a little bit more foundation around how pioneering this little place in central Minnesota is. We gave birth to Minnesota Public Radio and National Public Radio right on our campus. Bill Kling was a 1964 alum, asked for a little pocket money to do something with radio. Well, did he do something with radio, right? Made quite a mark. We also, interestingly enough, my friend and fellow alumnus, Richard Bresnahan, class of 1976, has established a pottery studio on our campus. It is the North America's largest wood-fired kiln. Think about that. 10 to 15,000 pieces of pottery are fired in this kiln every 2 years. A remarkable feat, if you will. So just wanted to give you a sense of this kind of pioneering spirit that this group of Benedictine men have always had and continue to have. Just a little bit of a public service announcement. If you're ever looking for a place to retreat, the beautiful 33-room guest house right on that lake that I showed you earlier, you would be warmly welcomed to join us there. While on campus, you would have the opportunity to take advantage of the St. John's Bible Gallery. This is a gallery that holds portions of the original manuscript, 28 folios at a time. And the good news is that the original manuscript, 1,150 pages of the original manuscript, has not been bound up until this point, and that has allowed us to have it on exhibit, not only in the gallery but around the world. But because it is done on calfskin vellum, and calves like to be in herds, we're bringing that together and are starting the binding process this year. So over the next 4 or 5 years, you will see the same 7 volumes of the St. John's Bible come together in that original manuscript. So you are starting, as of this weekend, a season with the St. John's Bible. And your season just happens to be a year in length. I'm very, very excited about that. Got to know Father Drew and Maureen a number of years ago. So this has been a slow roll up to this weekend, and we're very excited for you to be launching into your season. We only have the one volume in your midst here. This is the volume number 6, which contains the 4 Gospels and Acts of the Apostles. That's the volume you will have in your midst for this next year. But I wanted to give you a sense of all 7 volumes that make up the entire St. John's Bible. The first 5 of those make up the Old Testament. This volume and the volume that follow, volume 7, Letters and Revelation, would make up the New Testament. Just to give you a sense of some of the placements, because there are 299 of these 7-volume sets that were produced, only 299, and then the plates were broken. It's a limited edition, will never be a 300th produced. And about 175 of those or so, of those 299, have found permanent homes around the world, including my own little parish in Seattle. One of our parishioners, Alice Foreman, stepped forward one day and said, "I found the person to acquire the set for us, and it's me." And so she gifted it to our church, and we refer to it as our family Bible. So some recent dedications, and these are kind of the big smoke show type of examples. Washington National Cathedral a couple of years ago. I always kind of joked that I couldn't retire or die until I had a set placed at the National Cathedral, and now I can do both because we have one as of a couple of years ago, in October 15th of 2023. We took a group of about 50 over to the UK a couple of autumns ago to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the commissioning of the St. John's Bible, and during that time placed 3 sets in very prominent locations. Sarum College, with the dedication happening at Salisbury Cathedral. We then moved on to a little place called Lambeth Palace with the Archbishop of Canterbury, and dedicated a set there, and then moved from there to Canterbury Cathedral on November 11th of 2023. A few other places: Basilica of St. Mary in the Twin Cities, Durham Cathedral and St. David's Cathedral, both last fall. And while we were in town, we thought we would swing by and give a coronation gift to the King and Queen. So they indeed have a set as well. I look back on that photo and think, just a year ago, I was knocking around in the Royal Library and Royal Archives. I have to kind of pinch myself to remember that I actually had the chance to do that. Swanee, University of the South, maybe there's some Swanee folks in the room. St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City was gifted a set last year. Duke Divinity School, Dakota Wesleyan, the list goes on and on. In fact, a sale, an acquisition was just closed yesterday. I can't share who it is yet because they have not announced it internally, but those continue to find permanent homes around the world. So let me jump into the mission of the St. John's Bible. The mission has always been and will always be a 3-part mission, and that is to ignite the spiritual imagination of people around the world, important piece of that puzzle, of all faith journeys. Now, this was a Bible that was commissioned by a Catholic Benedictine group of men, but though that group of men would stress to you if they were here with you that this is not a Catholic Bible. They wanted it to be as far-reaching and as ecumenical as humanly possible, and they went to great lengths to ensure that. So that is the mission and will always be the mission of the St. John's Bible. In 2015, we made it at least partly around the world by we got to the Vatican and presented the final volume of the set for the Vatican to the late Pope. We had the chance to present volumes to 3 living popes. John Paul, in the last months of his life, accepted Gospels and Acts, then Benedict, and then Pope Francis in 2015. You might recall that it was in the fall of 2015 that Pope Francis made his first visit to the United States, and we marked that in September by gifting a set to the Library of Congress. So you're seeing in his honor. So you're seeing this being blessed there with members of Congress, members of the staff of the Library of Congress, etc. So, quickly, if you walk out of here and you think, I can't remember anything he said other than Donald Jackson. Those are the 2 words I'd like you to carry out of here. Donald Jackson. You're looking at Donald Jackson. This was Donald Jackson's dream from many, many years ago. Now, Donald's a remarkable guy, still a remarkable guy. He and his wife live in Wales. I was with them in the UK last fall. What he's working on, as you can see, is that very same illumination as the frontispiece to the Gospel of Matthew that's facing you there in that volume. Donald was always a remarkable, even as a young child, was found to be a remarkable and gifted artist, lettering artist, and came from a family of modest means. His father was a bicycle repairman. His mother was a homemaker. They didn't have a lot of extra money to support what was clearly a God-given gift, but they found a way to do that. So they sent young Donald off to London, and he studied and became a preeminent lettering artist in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, certainly one of the best. If you think back to your but middle school days, your art classes that you took when you were 12 or 13 years old. I think I remember a lot of popsicle sticks and glue, right? But if you think about your work and then you compare it to what Donald was doing during his middle school years, you can see that there was something special going on with Donald Jackson. This is work that he would study, and then he would go into the great museums and libraries of London, and he would copy the masterworks as part of his homework. So he got so good at what he did that he was recognized by the Crown Office. So he became the chief scribe to the late Queen of England and worked for the late Queen for many, many years as her chief scribe. So if she needed something done on a roll of vellum, a beautiful document announcing something, a wedding or otherwise, Donald was her guy. So she turned to Donald, and he did that work until he became involved with the St. John's Bible. So he has a lot of street cred, let's put it that way. In 2016, we're jumping ahead after the completion of this project, Donald received something quite extraordinary, and that was a papal knighthood was bestowed on him, the Order of St. Gregory. And this is something the Vatican doesn't hand out just every day, as you can imagine. And when they do, they usually bestow it on someone of the Catholic faith. Well, Donald, like us, is a member of the Anglican communion. So it was an extreme honor for him to accept this. And he was so humbled by it that he said, I'll accept it, but only on behalf of the entire team of 35 or so that were part of the production of this original manuscript. His name is the only one that resides on the papal knighthood, but he received it in the spirit of accepting it on behalf of the entire team. And then if you think it couldn't get any better than a papal knighthood, a couple years later, he got to hang out with me in Bellingham, Washington for a week. And I truly share this with you to let you know that he's still very much a part of this project. Even though the work was completed on the original manuscript in 2011, he's still very much a part of this. And so he attended what was the 37th annual calligraphy conference held in Bellingham, Washington, just up the street from me in Seattle. So I had all 7 volumes flown in, rented a van, took them up, set them up for these probably 400 or 500 calligraphers who literally levitated around this work and around Donald for the week. And so I tell you about this 37th conference because it was at the first conference that we began to get to know Donald. And I'm going to just move into that really quickly. In 1981, back at that time, you might remember, as I take a look, there are probably several of you in the room that remember that was kind of we began to see personal computers show up on our desktops. And I asked yesterday, what was the coolest thing about the the personal computer. I think it was Richard that said spell check, which he was right. Spell check was very, very good. But I maintain it was fonts. We could change any, change it to any font we wanted, right? Well, good news for us, not so good for lettering artists who made their bread and butter by doing wedding invitations and wedding envelopes and such. Well, this is kind of taking bread and butter off of their table. And so they decided to band together and come together in the very first calligraphy conference to kind of cry on each other's shoulders, hold each other up, learn from each other, get even better at what they were doing. And they decided to have this held at St. John's University. Had nothing to do with us being a mecca of calligraphy. It's just that we had open dormitories, a decent dining room, and a lake that they could jump into at the end of a long day after doing calligraphy. So that's what they decided to do. They came to our campus and they somehow coerced Donald Jackson, the scribe to the Queen of England, to come over to central Minnesota and spend that week with them in our old gymnasium. Now, I had just graduated. I had the honor of beginning to serve for 3 years as the assistant to the president, so I was still on campus at the time. And I was hearing this buzz in the hallway about this madman over in the gymnasium just lighting things on fire. And so I would go over on my lunch hours, and I'm not a calligrapher, I can't even spell calligraphy, but I would go over and I would stand at the back wall, kind of from where this photo was taken, and watch Donald, and I was mesmerized by this guy. His passion and his enthusiasm and his talent, clearly his talent, were visceral. You could feel it crackling in the air. And of course, you can't tell that these people are levitating off their seats about 3 inches, but they were. They were just on fire about this. So this was the week of the summer in 1981. I refer to this as our first date with Donald. And then we had a long-term courting, long-distance courting over 14 years. And he would come back to campus now and then with his wife. He built relationships with the monastic community, with members of the faculty and staff. And then in 1995, 14 years of courting, Donald thought to himself, I think these might be the people to bring my dream to fruition. Money. He was looking for money to bring this to life. And he had been shopping this idea around for quite a number of years. But he had spent enough time with us over this 14 years of courting to understand that these are the Benedictine monks that kind of gave this art form life centuries ago, that they were dedicated to scripture, dedicated to beauty. He looked around, noticed that we were probably pretty good at fundraising because the dorms are in pretty good shape and the tennis courts look brand new, right? So he thought, I think these are my people. So in 1995, he and Father Eric Hollis were on a panel together. They, in Chicago, after the panel presentation, they went out for a bite of lunch. And Donald knew this was the day he was going to pop the question. And so he was monitoring Eric's intake of pasta and wine, and when it got to be just the right blend, he said, Eric, what is the monastic community doing in 5 years from now to celebrate the new millennium? Eric's like, I don't know. He gave him that monk smile. I don't know. He said, probably cheap champagne, and we'll go to bed at 9:30 after playing poker, right? That's what we do. And Donald said, well, I've got a different idea. He said, why don't you think about me bringing the Word of God to life on the page in celebration of the new millennium? And Eric thought to himself, well, that's fascinating, but probably not what we need to do these days when we need to be running a 3,000-acre school and the whole kit and caboodle that comes along with running a university. So, but he jotted something down. So he took a cocktail napkin and he jotted down Donald Jackson, Big Bible, $, $. Stuck it in his pocket. And literally, it germinated in his pocket for 3 months. And then the guilt kind of kicked in. He thought, well, I got to tell somebody else about this. So he decided to tell his boss, the president of the university, Brother Dietrich Reinhardt. And he took it into Dietrich, but he tried to kind of stick it in the middle of things where he could get it off his chest, but then move on to the next agenda item very quickly. Well, he tried that, and Dietrich said, back up the bus. I need more color commentary about this Bible. So Eric shared a few more details, and Dietrich, in the moment, said, we must do that. We must do that. That must be our gift to the world for the millennium. Now, he could do that because he was president. He could I don't know that he wagged his finger. I like to think he wagged his finger when he said it in the halls of the university. But he was only one of about 180 monks, so he had to schlep over to the chapter house and present this to his 179 confreres, which he did. And they took 3 years to discern whether that this was a good idea. Now, if you know Benedictines, and I would say this if the room was filled with Benedictines, that's lightning speed, folks, for Benedictines. These are people who tell time in centuries, right? So 3 years is nothing. They can't even believe they did it in 3 years, honestly. So they decided they would move into it. The answer was yes, we're going to do this. We're going to pull focus from some of the other things that we do. We're going to move into this project. We're going to do it in some ways very much like they did it centuries ago. It's going to be big, it's going to be communal, it's going to celebrate the lettering arts, it's going to celebrate sacred art, but there are going to be some things very different about this Bible than the last handwritten Bible 500 years ago, prior to the advent of the printing press. We're going to use the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which we as Anglicans are thrilled about, right? That's our version. And we do that because it is more lyrical, more inclusive, and used by more faith communities around the world than any other, even though it isn't the lectionary of the Catholic Church. So they took a little bit of a risk there. And then they also said the illuminations, the 160 illuminations that ended up being scattered through those 7 volumes, are going to hold the story of honoring women the way women had not been honored in the Bibles prior, honoring science and technology because it is not in conflict with theology, and finally, bringing those who have been marginalized in our society, those we push to the corners or maybe even beyond the corners of our society, bringing them into the light and holding them up and honoring them. Really quite remarkable for a group of, men in the middle of a cornfield in Minnesota. So, just to give you a sense, we don't have time to go through these in great detail. Some of these reside in the volume you have, some of them don't. This, of course, does, and this holds all kinds of clues as to honoring women, honoring other faiths, honoring science and technology. This is the Adam and Eve that appears in the first volume of the St. John's Bible. Very different than the Adam and Eve I grew up with as a little Catholic schoolboy, right? Indicated by East Africans, the cradle of humanity, wisdom woman, suffering servant. Even the Hubble telescope played a role in helping us articulate art in the St. John's Bible. So in 1998, the green light was given to this project, and then you'd think, oh good, we're going to start building a Bible tomorrow. That answer is no. We have 2 more years of preparation time. Preparation in Wales as Donald had to gather his team. He wanted to do all of this himself. He knew he didn't have the time or energy to do that, so he had to find 5 additional scribes, 5 additional artists. He had to make 300 sheets of vellum to hold 1,200 pages of Bible. The whole host of things. He needed to design a script. You won't find this script anywhere else but the St. John's Bible. On the U.S. side of things, there was a group called the Committee on Illumination and Text, chaired by, sadly, the late Father Michael Patella. We just lost him this past summer after an 18-month battle with ALS. A wonderful, remarkable man. And this group was the group that decided which passages of the Bible would be illuminated, how much real estate on the page would be afforded to that illumination. And then finally, they were the ones that pulled together a brief, not so brief, for each of those illuminations that was given then to Donald as the artistic director and then ultimately to the artists, so they had a sense from a theological perspective what the underpinnings were that this committee was looking for. So they played a huge role. So finally, after first date and courting and popping the question and on and on and on, finally in the year 2000, on Ash Wednesday, the work vellum was hit with ink, and it took 11 years to complete the process. In 2011, what you're seeing here are the 2 sponsors, the abbot at the time and the president at the time, embossing 2 little St. John's crosses on the final pages of Letters and Revelation as the sponsors, kind of a very medieval process by indicating that they were pleased with the product that they had commissioned, and hallelujah, it was done after 11 years. Finally done. So the pages, as I mentioned earlier, are produced on calfskin, and I won't go through the process of how they got there because it's not a pretty process. It starts with calfskin. Let's just leave it at that. And then it's a soaking and scraping and scratching and sanding to become this beautiful venue for calligraphy and for art. And then each piece of the vellum would hold 4 pages of the St. John's Bible, 2 on the top side, 2 on the underside, if you can envision that. A rare Chinese ink that Donald had accumulated over the years was used for this very, very high quality ink. All the script was was produced using quills, turkey, swan, and goose quills. So I like to say no pens were harmed in the making of the St. John's Bible, right? Beautiful work. Again, 6 calligraphers, Donald, and 5 additional calligraphers to complete all that calligraphy that you'll grow used to. Scribes, you can see them there. Donald in the middle. To his right, as we're looking at it, in the black sweater, is Rabbi Izzy, who did all the Hebrew calligraphy for us in all 7 volumes. And then Brian Wilson to his right in the red sweater, who's a cardboard cutout because he didn't like to travel. So we just hauled out the cardboard cutout anytime we needed to have a full group picture. In addition to that beautiful calligraphy, we add these beautiful pigments, the lapis, the vermilion to the pages that you're going to be able to see over the course of the year and thoroughly enjoy. 6 artists, Donald being one of those. So Donald, keep in mind, was the artistic director and a scribe and an artist all simultaneously. So what really brings this to life, what brings these pieces of work to life and gives us the opportunity to refer to this as an illuminated Bible is the embossing of precious metal on these pieces of art. So what you have in the Heritage Edition is a foiling that mimics the precious metal, okay? But on the original, gold leaf and palladium leaf and platinum leaf were used to bring the luster to these beautiful pieces of art. So I think I like to refer to it as an illuminated Bible on a couple of different levels, in that the precious metal brings the work of art to life, and the work of art brings the word of Christ, of God, to life. The artists, you can see there. What's fascinating to me is Donald hired scribes that he knew were seasoned enough and could be trained to be able to copy his hand and use his script that you're going to grow used to over the next year as if one hand had completed all 1,150 pages. He wanted that kind of Zen flow to make it look as though one person had done all the calligraphy, whereas these artists that he hired are wildly different in style, and he wanted that kind of shock and awe as you move from one page. The tallest gentleman in the back there, Aidan Hart, is a world-renowned Greek iconographer. His work looks like it could have come out of a 14th or 15th century manuscript. You move from a page that Aidan has done to a page that Suzanne Moore, who's in the foreground with the striped scarf on, her work is so contemporary it looks like it might be damp. So he loved that juxtaposition and really wanted that juxtaposition of the art laid on top of that Zen flow of the calligraphy. In addition to, and this is just a little nod to the artists themselves, on that same tour in the UK in 2023, one of the evenings was dedicated to a beautiful ceremony in this beautiful space, a kind of a Harry Potter-esque space with a beautiful meal. And we honored the 35 individuals who were part of the production of the original manuscript. They received our Pax Christi Award, which is the highest award that our university and Abbey presents. And it was an amazing night for me because it was a little bit like a storybook coming to life. I've been telling this story and talking about these people for a dozen years, but I hadn't met all of them. So they were kind of coming alive for me that night, and they were incredibly honored to be honored in that way with them. And I was honored to have the chance to spend time with them. Question often comes up about mistakes. Any mistakes? Yep, 9 of them that I talk about. Or a couple of others we don't talk about, but 9 there, and the 9 that we talk about are what we refer to as a dropped line. So imagine you're working from a template, you're a scribe, and it taking 8 to 12 hours per page, by the way, just to give you a sense of how long this work takes. And you get down at the bottom of a column, and you check it with your template. And the good news is the final word on your column on the template is the final word on the column you've just completed. The bad news is you have an extra line of space. Something has gone terribly wrong, and you trace your way back up and you realize you've dropped a line. So we use, instead of just scraping all that work off, which you can do on vellum, you can scrape it off and resand it. It gives you one chance to take another run at it, but it's 6 hours of work that you're scraping off, right? So let's have a little fun with it. Let's involve wildlife. Let's bring a lemur into action. And this has been happening for a long time. We weren't the first ones to make these kinds of mistakes, so I love this one. that silent P will get you every time. It will get you every time. This is my favorite. So you have a line, this is a dropped line, and you can see where the line is to go. It was dropped all the way up here. So you'd have to scrape all that work off. I don't think so. You know, so what we'll do instead is let's just take the line, we'll write it in the margin here. I called on God and the spirit of wisdom came to me. Wrap it in a scroll, tie it with a silk cord, run that silk cord up through a Leonardo da Vinci pulley system, hand it to a big juicy Minnesota bumblebee and say, pull. Pull like you've never pulled before. And you can almost hear the gears squeaking to get that line up to where it belongs. So there are 9 of those, and there's one that resides in this volume that you'll enjoy, and it is here. And so we employ a dove and hand that cord to the dove. In its talons, it flies north, and with its beak points to where that should be inserted. So really quickly, because we have just a matter of minutes, to talk about this beautiful heritage edition that you have in your midst. So you have a sense of how the original was produced. But we decided, if you think about the mission of the St. John's Bible, to share it with the world, around the world, we knew that that was going to be a very difficult piece of the mission to live up to with one manuscript squirreled away in central Minnesota. So Donald agreed, yes, let's expand this, let's produce a fine art, full-sized, museum-quality reproduction that can be, you know, housed around the world in various institutions. And so we've done that. Now Donald said, inserted himself, keeping in mind he was only about 3/7 of the way through the original manuscript. And that's when we got the idea to extend it in by producing the Heritage Edition. And Donald said, okay, I'm art directing the original, I'm a calligrapher in the original, I'm an artist in the original, I'm also going to be the artistic director for the Heritage program. They tried to talk him out of it, and he said, well, I'm not asking you if you want me to be. I'm informing you that I will be. And thank goodness he found a way to spin 4 plates. I don't know how he did it, but he spun 4 plates simultaneously because the quality that you have here in your midst for the next year is remarkably different and remarkably better than it would have been had we been left to our own devices, because Donald demanded that we do all kinds of things. So the Heritage Edition is the only full-sized fine art production. Now you see on these back tables something we refer to as the trade edition or the coffee table edition. Those are very accessible, but this is the only full-sized. And we also have something, as of recently, online. There's a turn-the-page technology that we've added to our website where anyone around the world with access to a computer, his or her own or a public computer, can turn every page of the St. John's Bible. So it's all about the access. As I said, Donald Jackson created art directed, because he said every step of this work needs to be about maintaining the original, is getting as close to the original as possible. And he said, with all Benedictine humility pushed aside, I'm really the only one who can make that call. And so that's why I need to step into this role. And so he worked very hard at making that happen. The imaging happened right on our own campus. We've had the world's best experts on manuscript preservation for about 70 years, so we didn't have to look any further than our own campus for that. We looked around the world for people to print, to emboss, and to bind. We ended up in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, for both the printing and the embossing. The binding happens by hand in Phoenix, Arizona. All the printing and embossing for all 299 sets has been completed years ago, but we bind in sets of 10 as we need them or anticipate needing them. So I'll move through this very quickly because we have worship happening here very shortly. The paper that you're going to experience here is not calfskin vellum. It is cotton paper that was produced specifically for this project. It was made under Donald's, probably not a big surprise at this point, under Donald's directions, very specific directions about how this cotton paper, with just a little bit of sizing to hold it together, would come together and hold the pages of the Heritage Edition. This is the offset printer, the Heidelberg XL 105, the offset lithography press that allowed us to do something that even the best print houses in Europe said, you're not going to be able to do this. It's going to be like taking a Sharpie to a roll of toilet paper. You can't do on cotton, unvarnished, unsealed cotton, what you can do on vellum. Well, this technology allowed us to do that, and it's remarkable. One thing that I will tell you that was where Donald just went above and beyond to make sure that this replicated the original was the cotton that is on which this is printed is thicker than vellum. It's not as translucent as vellum. So when Donald was seeing the pages come off of the press that you just saw, he noticed that the show-through of some of the imagery was not showing through as much, right? Because the cotton was thicker. And so he said, I need you to fix that. And so when you take a look at any page on this Heritage Edition that has any kind of show-through, you're seeing some natural show through that cotton, but you're also seeing a fool-the-eye, trompe-l'oeil watermark printed on this side of the page to mimic the show-through, to make sure that it's exactly dialed up to the same degree as the original. I mean, just, you'll experience that when you get up close and personal with this over the next year. It is a remarkable feat of technology. So let me just close out by saying that not only do we have the beautiful printing, but the embossing took place at Macintosh Embossing, something Donald absolutely demanded. He said, if you think we're just going to print the colors of gold and silver, he said, then we're not going to do this project. It has to have the same reflective property as the original, and we'll use a high-quality foiling to mimic that. It won't be precious metal, but it will look very, very close. And even though these 299 sets are printed, you expect everyone to be exactly the same, and they would have been, except Sarah Harris, the studio manager, took something as pedestrian as a Scotch-Brite scrub pad and went in on about a half a dozen of the illuminations and just brushed them very slightly with that kind of a tool or steel wool to bring the same kind of depth and character that you would see in the original manuscript. So no 299 sets are exactly the same because of the handwork that Sarah did. The binding, I'll close out with that, in Roswell Bookbinding in Arizona, a team that is dedicated and loving and do this intimate work all by hand. I was there a couple of years ago, and this is team that Pepe, you see in most of these, has been involved in the project from the very beginning. You see him hand washing, hand buffing, hand tooling, and getting those, everything just right. And it's all done by hand. Even the text block is sewn by a couple of women using a linen thread from London. So the intimacy and the love that is, and Father Drew mentioned that, about the love that is worked into every page of every volume of this Bible is quite remarkable. They reside in almost 200 places around the world, of all kinds, colleges and universities, churches and cathedrals, hospitals and clinics, and the like. So what you have here for the year as part of your season is this Gospels and Acts volume with the cradle, St. John's Library set of books that will help you move your way through all of this work, access to all the digital images. I won't go through, but there's a story that I typically like to tell if we had more time, but images are widely used. In fact, they even show up on the official soap of the St. John's Bible at All Saints Episcopal Church in Arizona. Just wanted to let you know this is a really quick overview, as you can see, and yet you have access to a really good and revised website that we just launched a couple of months ago. This was the old website. We're done with that. This is what the new website looks like if you went in and just typed in the Google St. John's Bible. This is what would come up, and you'll have information about the original manuscript, the Heritage Edition, and that seeing the Bible, turning the pages technology that I referred to earlier. So let me just close by saying, people often ask us, why did you bother to step into this Heritage Edition? Well, it's because it allows our mission to be brought to life through you. It would have been a little bit like putting a bushel basket over a lamp if we had just had one original manuscript in Minnesota. But what we get to do is allow you to take this into your community and bring life to it and fulfill the mission. We could not fulfill the mission of the St. John's Bible on our own. It takes you all to do that, sharing it with your faith community here at Christ Church and beyond. There's already great planning going on with members of this team here as to how this will be shared with the broader community. So I don't think I've ever done that faster.
Very
Impressive.
I wish we had as much time as we had yesterday for this conversation, because it really was remarkable, and we will someday perhaps sort that out.
Great.
And I know we don't even have enough time for full questions, so I'm going to ask you to share two things from yesterday that I think speak to the next part of this conversation,
Okay.
which is the whole intent of the St. John's Bible is to bring God's gift, God's word, God's story into the world, and for it to encounter our community, us individually and the broader community. So there are two stories you shared yesterday.
Yes.
Of all the places that it's housed, one stood out to me.
Yes.
It was about, I think it was Austin, Minnesota.
Yes.
Spam.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that purchase
Yeah.
and that installation.
So it's a library in Austin, Minnesota, not right next door to the spam plant, but pretty close to the spam plant. And what's remarkable about that, it probably wouldn't surprise you to learn that the Morgan Library in New York City has a set. That makes sense. Well, there was a retired executive from Hormel who said, if those fancy pants folks in New York City have a set, I want my buddies to have a set in Austin. And so he bought the set, and not only did he buy a set for a regional library that's about the size of this Undercroft. I mean, it's a tiny little library. Not only did he say, I want this available, but I want you, library staff, to find a way to allow this to be checked out and allow access to it. And he said, if I come back in 10 years, and there's not a little, underscore little, a little bit of wear and tear on this thing, he said, I made a bad investment. It goes back to what Father Drew said at the very beginning in the announcements prior to worship this morning, is this was designed to be used. This is not a showpiece. This is not something to be behind protective glass. This is something for you to get in and turn those pages, feel there's a visceral response that you have when you turn those pages, when you spend time doing Visio Divina with those illuminations. It will change you. It has changed me.
And then the second story, and I know this one's going to take a little, it's going to mean you're going to come late till 11:15.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. I know you have to run away with
And
this.
I'm going to have to run away with this. My commitment to you is I'm going to turn the page after the 11:15, and we'll have this page out. A picnic blanket.
Oh.
I'm going to have to depart before this story starts or ends.
Okay.
So first, last word of thanks.
Thank you.
Just wonderful. I'll see you after the service.
Yes, yes.
And I have to take this, so you're going to forgive me. But everything he's talking about will be upstairs and on display through this week to come.
Let me very quickly just turn to